Welcome to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast. If someone in your life has BPD, you know how difficult it can be, and you need to learn how to heal from those toxic relationships. And that's where this show comes in. Expert education, expert knowledge, expert insight, and delivered with compassion and empathy. With your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. To purchase and book sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. Now your host, AJ Mahari.
A couple things before we start this episode. I have a website for this podcast, and it's at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. Interactive website. It's a website is its own feed for the podcast and also for my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to get a lot of the videos that aren't in this podcast, you'd like to check those out, you can do that at survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. I would just like to encourage you to please leave a 5-star rating for this podcast if you find it helpful, to help this podcast keep growing and keep reaching more and more people who could benefit from this content. I get a lot of people with BPD rating it at 1 star because, they have all these problems with what I'm saying, and they think it's horrible and disgusting and all that kind of BPD kind of stuff. This podcast website is survivingbpdrelationshipbreakup.com. And now, let's dive into today's episode. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a pattern that people think is communication, might look like communication, might resemble something to do with communication, but it isn't communication. It's not a conversation between two adults trying to understand each other either. It's an emotional collision between two nervous systems, one fighting abandonment, the other fighting rejection. If you've ever found yourself caught in an exhausting, repetitive, ongoing, never-ending emotional exchange with someone who has borderline personality disorder, and you yourself may well have codependency, where logic breaks down, you feel blamed or misunderstood, and you end up over-explaining, just trying to calm them. What you experienced wasn't a, quote, conversation, unquote. It was what's known as an induced conversation. Part 1. What is an induced conversation? An induced conversation happens when a person with borderline personality disorder unconsciously induces or pulls and maybe manipulates, maybe consciously somewhat, another person, often a codependent, into their dysregulated emotional state. They're not manipulating deliberately, maybe, sometimes, but other times they could be manipulating deliberately, consciously or unconsciously. People with BPD are projecting unbearable internal emotions of shame, fear, rage, abandonment, panic outward onto the person closest to them. For the codependent whose self-worth depends on maintaining harmony in the relationship with the borderline, that projection feels like a call to action. The urge to fix, rescue, explain, comfort, or calm them down becomes overwhelming. And in that moment, without realizing it, you've stepped inside their emotional world, leaving your own grounded state behind. This is the beginning of the borderline emotional contagion, where their nervous system sets the rhythm and yours starts dancing to their nervous system dysregulation. Part 2. The emotional mechanics of the induced conversation. Let's break it down simply. The borderline person experiences intense fear of abandonment or fear of engulfment or rejection. They feel unsafe internally, very emotionally dysregulated, often don't know all what they're feeling or why, and they try to regulate through external control, often through intense emotional charged communication and abject, unmitigated projection of what they're feeling onto the person closest to them. The codependent person experiences anxiety when others are upset. Their childhood wiring says, if I can calm you, I'll be safe. Otherwise, I don't know what to do. And it's a very fear-inducing, rejection sensitivity, fear of abandonment situation for the person with codependency in their own right. So when the borderline says something like, you don't care about me, You're just like everyone else. You're abandoning me. The codependent doesn't hear an expression of pain. They hear a threat to connection. Immediately, their system floods with guilt, panic, and the drive to prove love or restore peace. This creates a closed loop of survival responses. The borderline projects abandonment. The codependent absorbs it and tries to fix it. The borderline feels temporarily soothed, but the core fear remains. The codependent feels emotionally drained and increasingly unseen. It's not communication. It's a trauma exchange. Part 3. The nervous system collision between the borderline and you, the borderline and the codependent. Here's what's happening physiologically. For the person with BPD, their nervous system state is hyperarousal. The person with codependency, the nervous system state in induced conversation is hyperarousal or fawning. The borderline trauma response in induced conversation or induced communication, which isn't really that, is fight-flight. And the codependent's trauma response is freeze-appease. The borderline's emotional belief or misperception is, I'm being abandoned. And the codependent's misbelief or emotional belief, misbelief or misconception is, if I fix this, I'll be safe. Each person's body is trying to survive the other's reaction. The borderline's voice may rise, tone may shift, tears may come, not from malice, but from deep fear. Sometimes just rage, anger, and trying to obliterate you. The codependent's breathing shallows, voice softens, body leans in, trying to regulate the storm. It feels intimate, emotional, real, but it's not connection. It's when talk turns trauma. It's dysfunctional, it's dysregulation masquerading as, quote, love, unquote. It's pseudo-communication. It's not really communication. Part 4. The childhood blueprint behind induced conversation. Induced conversations are familiar to both people, not because they're healthy, but because they echo early attachment wounds. The borderline grew up with unpredictable or emotionally unavailable caregivers. To survive, they learned to externalize emotion to make others feel what they felt, hoping someone would finally understand. And the codependent grew up being the emotional caretaker, walking on eggshells, keeping peace, minimizing conflict to feel secure. So needing to make others feel okay so that you, the codependent, could feel okay. So when they meet, borderlines and codependents, each of their nervous systems recognize each other. This is part of the trauma bond. The borderline says, don't leave me. The codependent says, I'll never leave, no matter what. And together, they recreate the emotional climate of their childhoods, the chaos, the rescue, the guilt, the shame, all disguised as supposed here and now intimacy. Part 5. How induced conversations sound. Let's look at what this sounds like in real time. First example, BPD partner, you don't love me, you're pulling away again. Codependent, no, I'm not. I promise I love you. I'm right here. The BPD partner feels momentary reassurance. The codependent feels anxious relief, and both are reinforced in the pattern. Example 2. BPD partner says, you make me feel like I'm nothing. Codependent, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. What did I do? The BPD partner discharges shame through blame. The codependent absorbs it and becomes the emotional container. Example 3. BPD partner, silent withdrawal, cold tone, emotional shutdown. Codependent, oh, please talk to me. Tell me what I did wrong. The borderline avoids engulfment. The codependent panics and chases. Each of these exchanges strengthens the trauma bond and erodes the codependent's sense of self. Part 6. Why this becomes addictive. Induced conversations create a chemical addiction. The rush of adrenaline, cortisol, and dopamine during emotional intensity mimics connection. After conflict, reconciliation brings temporary calm, releasing oxytocin and feeling like relief. This push-pull chemistry wires the brain to crave the very chaos that's destroying peace. For both people, silence feels unsafe. For the borderline, silence feels like abandonment. For the codependent, silence feels like punishment. So both reinitiate contact, not for connection, but to end discomfort. And that happens sometimes, not always with the borderline. Part 7, how to recognize that you're in an induced conversation. You'll know you're in an induced conversation when you feel emotionally hijacked or confused mid-conversation. You start defending things you didn't actually do. You feel guilty or responsible for the borderline's emotions. You realize afterward you didn't express your truth, only managed their feelings and their, quote, truth, unquote. You leave the interaction exhausted and not understood. The most telling sign that you're in or just had an induced conversation, you feel the need to explain yourself to preserve peace rather than to be understood. Part 8, how to step out of this cycle. Breaking free from induced conversations isn't about winning or proving. It's best to end the situationship, the relationship, the drama, the cycles, in order to really step out. But if you're trying to step out and still in contact with some relationship or on and off with the borderline, it's about reclaiming your nervous system. And of course, if you stay in a relationship, they're going to take it over again. So to really reclaim your nervous system, the relationship and the cycles of said have to stop. But in reclaiming your nervous system, number 1 is pause before reacting. When you feel the emotional pull, stop, breathe, ground your feet, ask yourself, is this mine or am I being pulled into their stuff? 2, anchor in the body, regulate first, deep breaths, slow exhale, relax your shoulders. The body must lead before the mind can think clearly. 3, set emotional boundaries in real time. Say less, speak calmly, use statements like, I want to talk, but not when we're both upset. I care about you, but I can't take responsibility for your feelings. Number 4, don't chase clarity from chaos. When someone is dysregulated, the goal isn't understanding, and it isn't rescuing them, it's your emotional safety. Step away. Clarity comes only in regulation. And in borderline relationships, if you get any clarity, it's sure to be lost again to the cycle of never-ending looping, devaluation, splitting devaluation, and continued borderline inducing of conversation. And number 5, relearn connection through calm, which you really can't do with a person with untreated BPD or not extremely well treated BPD. Healing requires new patterns, connection without chaos, love without crisis. You're not going to get that from a person with untreated borderline personality disorder. Part 9, can you heal this pattern of induced conversation? For the borderline, healing comes from learning to self-soothe and tolerate perceived rejection without externalizing pain. And this for borderlines to actually be able to do and to learn how to do and to be consistent and congruent with this, mutual and reciprocal, it takes 8 to 16 years in psychodynamic therapy, and it requires therapy. And make no mistake about it, they're not going to just learn how to self-soothe and tolerate perceived rejection without externalizing pain anytime soon. For the codependent, healing means tolerating someone else's discomfort without losing yourself trying to rescue or fix. Both the codependent and the borderline must learn emotional sovereignty, Your feelings are yours and mine are mine. This doesn't happen in relationships with borderlines, and it doesn't happen for people unless they can heal their codependency. So just in closing, a reflection. When talking turns to trauma, silence is not avoidance, it's wisdom. You are not responsible for carrying someone else's storm. You are responsible for recognizing when your piece is being pulled into their pain, chaos, drama, and emotional storms. Learning to step back isn't abandonment, though they'll continue to believe it is. It's, on your part, it's self-preservation. And often that stepping back means the relationship will have to end. And sometimes the most loving thing you can try to say to the borderline is, I care about you, but I can't have this conversation right now. To which they'll feel abandoned and more chaos and drama will ensue. Because love that destroys your regulation is not love, it's trauma reenactment. So may you find the strength to pause when pulled into chaos. And most people in these relationships with borderlines, any relationship type, codependency, you really need your own therapy in order to find the strength to pause when being pulled into chaos. And I'm out here to work with anybody that resonates with me who wants to take that healing journey. And may your body remember calm as safety, which again, you're not really going to experience or be able to find or reclaim for yourself in a relationship with all this chaos and drama and the borderline constantly, continually inducing conversations with you. And may your conversations become places of truth, not trauma. And again, for that to happen, it won't happen in a relationship with an untreated borderline or a not really extremely well enough treated person with borderline personality disorder. Induced conversation, similar to the Jade conversation, neither is a conversation. Jade is how you justify, argue, defend, and explain, because the person with BPD just keeps on hurling stuff at you and projecting all over you. It's in this same vein that the borderline induces conversation, and in the induction of conversation, they are consciously or unconsciously manipulating. They are high conflict. They are trying to put you in the one down position so they can feel better. They are trying to get control over you, and at the same time devalue you, maybe go from, quote, love, unquote, to hate, but still be demanding rescue. And you wonder why you're exhausted, and you wonder why you don't know yourself anymore, and you wonder why it's so painful and you feel so stuck, and it's so hard to break out of a relationship with somebody with BPD, but break the trauma bond and deal with the fantasy bond. It's a whole lot of work, and it starts with an action step toward working with someone out here to work with you if I resonate with you. And it also starts with knowing or beginning to start to realize that this relationship is not going to work out. And you might know that in your head, but the cognitive dissonance, your heart won't be catching up anytime real soon. So really think about that, and maybe journal about what your experience is with a borderline inducing conversation, and what happens to you, and how exhausting and deflating and demoralizing, and how just, physiologically it's really impacting your nervous system negatively, impacting you psychologically negatively. You're losing yourself. You can't fix, rescue, or change this person. And they're annihilating you, but yet they will say you're annihilating them. I hope this helps. And as always, take care.
You've been listening to the Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup Podcast with your host, counselor and trauma recovery coach, AJ Mahari. For more or get sessions with AJ, go to ajmahari.ca. See you next time.